Thank you and welcome. I have some remarks and we'll hand it over to our panelists. The fates of photography and technology have always been intertwined. You can go all the way back to how painters must have felt when the first photographs came out of the darkroom. But even in the more recent past, the eras that I've weathered, like many of you in the room today, the medium itself has constantly evolved. The film camera was disrupted by digital ones, the digital cameras disrupted by the smartphone. How you get your work seen has evolved. Print publications were disrupted by websites then disrupted by social platforms. And social platforms unlocked the power of recommendation systems to curate the world's photography at the scale of trillions. Getting your work seen today is not just about getting it published. It is to do so by successfully validating the predictions of machine learning algorithms, which are now very good at predicting what each of us want to see more of. And now, you don't even need a camera, or a paintbrush for that matter, to create any image that you can imagine with your mind. We are talking today about generative AI. This frontier has certainly been a major plot twist in our story. I was reminded recently of a conversation with Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired magazine, who said that anytime there is a paradigm shift like this, it's accompanied by a panic cycle. Do any of you feel like you are in a panic cycle with generative AI? I see no one? Someone? Okay, the higher the hand, the higher the panic. Okay, cool. And yet in all of this chaos and danger, there is curiosity and wonder. We can hold complex feelings of fear and possibility at once. That is only human. But maybe what's really happening in these panic cycles is that each new technology brings new challenges to our value systems. How can our regulatory bodies keep up? Certainly. But also, how do we preserve societal values like trust, authenticity, and expression as we move through this panic cycle and begin to accept these capabilities in our new normal? The one thing that we do know is that ignoring the capabilities of generative AI and hoping that it will all just go away is probably not the right strategy. We have an amazing panel with us today to share their explorations into this space and invite us to think about the values that we must hold on to as we venture forward. People are discovering capabilities that the inventors did not foresee, for better and worse. We welcome Hany Farid, who is on the front lines of the darkest forensic work in this space. He's in the business of identifying deep fakes in audio, images, and video, powerful uses of generative AI that can spread misinformation and undermine our trust in anything we see or hear. And once again, photography finds itself in an existential crisis. Every day, there are new attempts to force a distinction between what is photography and what is an AI-generated image. We welcome Jonas Bendiksen, whose self-inflicted attack on his own authenticity highlights the challenges we now face in this regard to an unprecedented scale and depth. New expertise is developing in how we interface with AI, from human-computer interactions, like prompt engineering, to even computer-to-computer interactions, like AutoGPT's recent promises of, quote-unquote, acting autonomously by basically having a conversation with versions of itself until its task is complete. These new languages are emerging, and we welcome Alexey Yurenev, whose ongoing investigation into how these languages shape our memory is mysterious and profound. Final note before I turn it over to our panelists, who will each give brief remarks before our discussion. I ask we all take one deep breath. We only have 45 minutes today. You may be feeling a little overwhelmed, and I can't promise that 45 minutes from now, you will be less overwhelmed. It is a lot. But let's take this time together to discuss some of the key themes emerging in generative AI that are affecting visual storytelling and how each of us, as journalists, artists, creators, and citizens, can rise to meet this moment. Thank you for sticking with us to the end of this day, and welcome to our first panelist, Hany Farid.
Thank you. Thanks. Good to be here. So you can see the image that I'm seeing. Well, how do you know what I'm seeing? You see a pope on the right? Excellent. So I don't think I have to tell this group that we have been manipulating photographs for as long as we've been taking photographs. You can go back to the 1930s and Stalin airbrushed people out of photograph using classic dodging and burning and in-painting in the darkroom. What has happened since the 1930s through today is just how we do it, how easy it is to do it, how it's been democratized, and then of course what happens to those photos once they have been manipulated. So let's fast forward through time, 1930 to 1982. What now seems like a quaint manipulation, National Geographic created a huge stir because they moved one of the pyramids ever so slightly to fit their aspect ratio. As an Egyptian, I was particularly offended by this. But now in hindsight, you think, what's the big deal? All right, let's fast forward. Between the 80s and 2000, what happened? The digital revolution. Digital cameras, Photoshop, PCs on every desk. And what we started seeing were images like the shark attacking the helicopter pilot here. And that started to become, and by the way, if you learn nothing else from this panel, here it is. Images with sharks are almost always fake. And from the 2000s, we saw a lot of trickery with Photoshop, but it still took some skill. You had to know how to use Photoshop, and you had to get just the right composite to do that. But by 2015, you started seeing more sophisticated photo manipulation. This is a fantastic photo of then Vice President Biden in what looked like to be a Camaro with some pretty cool looking tattoos. That is not him, of course. And you know, by the mid-2000s, we were worried about how Photoshop was being used to manipulate images. But that was really, we're going to look back on that the same way we look back at the National Geographic cover there, because today, you can go over to a website, Midjourney, OpenAI, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, and you can type in, please give me an image of a pope in a puffy coat, and it will generate that image that you see right there. Whole cloth, completely generated by a computer. By the way, the single best thing about this photo is when the guy who created it was asked why he did it, he said, well, I was tripping on mushrooms. And I thought, yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. I can see that. And so now we have, which is what is generative AI, is the ability to whole cloth generate images from a single, simple text prompt. And the reason we can do that, it's not really an AI revolution, it's a data revolution. The reason we can do this is because the people in this room have been putting their images with captions online, and little bots have been scurrying around the internet, scraping all of that up, and teaching machines how to do this. Yeah? And not only can you do this, we're going to talk about photography, but I will tell you, you can also go to a website and upload about a minute of somebody's voice and clone their voice, and then type, and it will say whatever you want in that person's voice. You can create videos of a person saying and doing anything using the same core technology. And we are now entering a really interesting time where it is getting harder and harder and harder to believe what you see and what you hear. And here's just one example, and then I'll stop. Elon Musk is currently being sued because a young man died in a self-driving car because he was playing a video game in self-driving mode. And the family is suing Elon Musk because they say that Elon Musk said self-driving cars are perfectly safe. Okay? And the young man believed it. And you know what Elon Musk is now saying? It's a deep fake. I didn't say it. And that's the world we're entering, where you don't have to be responsible for anything anymore, because if you can generate images like this, nothing has to be real. And I think that's a really fascinating way we need to rethink the very fundamental nature of photography. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Hany. Next up, we have Jonas.
All right. Yeah, great to be here. So self-inflicted wounds and so forth. The Book of Veles, my latest book from 2021, basically was about the phenomenon of fake news and sort of synthetic information, synthetic images, centered around the story of what happened in Veles in North Macedonia in 2016 during the Trump election, where basically in this sleepy town, some local youth made the town an epicenter of production of fake news, basically. Wrote themselves onto the world map. They essentially ran hundreds of websites that all pretended to be American news portals. They had names like New York Times Politics.com and something that resembled the real thing. This got picked up by the algorithms of Twitter and Facebook, spread to millions of Americans. The guys in Veles made quite a bit of money from this by basically cutting and pasting a bunch of sort of well-known conspiracy theories and general clickbait of all kinds. I thought this was utterly fascinating, what had happened. Decided to make a project looking into this. So Veles also happened to be the name of a sort of powerful Slavic god, a sort of sneaky shapeshifter of a god, the god of chaos and mischief and magic and trickery of all kinds. And there was also the story of the Book of Veles, which was a sort of allegedly ancient manuscript printed on or etched into wooden boards, sort of a historical religious manuscript that later was found to be a forgery, piece of fake news from the 1920s that is alive and well today. So in this book, I sort of mix and blend these three stories together, basically. Photographs, facsimiles of this ancient manuscript, headlines from the sort of fake news websites they ran in this place. Yeah, and the images seems like a sort of classic piece of photojournalism. Street scenes, portraits, etc. But basically what I was doing was investigating some various ways to make synthetic images. So there are no real people in this photo essay. All the subjects are essentially computer generated by various programs the computer game industry uses to make avatars and 3D modeling, basically. It's also a look into my own way of looking in my 25 years as a documentary photography. It's about the language of photojournalism and sort of how to package this basically fake story about fake news producers into something that's halfway believable. I forgot to mention that the god Veles often took the shape of a bear, so this bear is walking all over the photo essay. So there's all kinds of strange things going on here. All the text in the book is generated by GPT-2, the predecessor to ChatGPT, which we read a lot about now. 5,000 word essay generated by machine learning. The book came out in April 21. The idea was to use it as sort of an experiment to see how long does it take before I get caught red-handed. I mean, there was kind of lots of hints, you know, there were bears walking around and junk text and really kind of badly made images all over the place. I thought it would take 2-3 weeks and somebody would get suspicious. I would get caught, there would be a little noise around it, and I would launch the book and this conversation basically like we're having right now. This plan completely failed. The book came out, I started sharing the material in all my channels, and I got just heaps of love and hearts on Instagram and thumbs up on all Facebook, and everyone thought this was a wonderful piece of photojournalism. Thank God we still have investigative journalists who are still out there doing the real work. I realized we were basically in great trouble. Shortly told, lots of strange and scandalous things happened. The work was picked up and showed at Visa pour l'Image, basically the biggest photojournalism festival in France, on the big screen. Terrible things. I tried to find a way out of this pickle, the one who helps me out of the pickle is this fake social media account I bought for $20 called Chloe Miskin. She sort of attacks me on social media channels, come with grave accusations against me, and there's a lot of arguments. And finally, she causes me to get caught. Like all criminals, you in the end want to get caught, right, and punished. Anyway, sort of this becomes the cause for quite a bit of writing about this topic about what are we gonna do, also miraculously I somehow happened to land on my feet, and I'm still sitting here without any injuries. Thank you.
So many questions for you, Jonas. But before that, we move to our last panelist, Alexey. Alexey, all yours.
Thank you so much. It's a big honor to be here, and I have to say it's quite ironic to be the Russian guy on this panel and not trying to deepfake anyone. I'm going to talk about a couple of projects I did where I used generative media and synthetic images to explore more of a fictioning potential and their creative potential to tell stories. And one project I've been working on for the last 4 years is about my grandfather who fought in the war and never talked about it. And my childhood reverberated with the echoes of the war, and it was his memory that I never experienced was reinforced by monuments and parades and archival pictures, and it was everywhere. But my grandfather never spoke about it. At home, he would categorically refuse to say anything. He would either cry or make jokes. And when he died in 2009, I never knew anything about his experience in the war. So I began learning how to work with artificial intelligence to try to recover a memory that doesn't exist. Particularly, there's this project called This Person Doesn't Exist that inspired me to think of his memory that doesn't exist, and all of a sudden having this technology at hand that can put me in this place that doesn't exist anymore, and provide me with a different kind of image than those that I grew up with, or they were typically reinforced by the state archives that were, as Hany mentioned, were often retouched and staged, and I didn't find them reliable. So I trained my own system on 35,000 images of the Great Patriotic War that I sourced in the archives. And I trained a machine, and what it spewed out was images that they didn't carry this iconicity and glory that the archival images did. They were not so persuasive. And in this really strange, ominous machine language, still conveyed the psychological essence of the war. They're not statistical, they're psychological. And when I look at them, I still see war. I see battles, I see explosions, I see military equipment. And to my surprise, I decided to create a feedback loop and upload them to Google API's Cloud Vision to see how machine perceives them. And what it saw in those images, where we can, I hope, agree that this is just an abstraction, and I'm biased because I saw so many images of the war that I still see war in them. The machine saw military uniform, military person, history, violence, and etc. So for me, it proved that machine language is just as subjective as human, at least for now. And also it made me set a parameter in my work that not only that my machine knows the war images and dreams of the war, but it also, I would embed into my images metadata stating that they are synthetic, because the data set being the additional archival regimes and regimes of knowledge, it puts it in danger in the world rife with conspiracy theories that a precedent for a Holocaust denial. Then I trained another machine that you're looking at right now on images of healthy soldiers. And after ingesting all these images, it spewed out this set of soldiers that are disfigured and horror-like. And here again, the statistical intelligence proves to know more and see the truth behind the image of war, that in fact it's ugly. And working with AI, in a way, also embarked me on this journey, and kind of like you open one door and there's 10 more. And to find more data for the machine, I discovered about the fate of the brother of my grandfather, who disappeared shortly after enlisting into the army, and made me go and conduct field work, forensically searching for his last position. and encountering the voids in the landscape. And again, as my machine was dreaming, as if my war machine was dreaming of itself, I witnessed this scene in Stalingrad when my granduncle died, where I witnessed a regiment of soldiers on the way to give an oath to the Russian army, and 3 weeks later, Russia invaded Ukraine. There are other exercises in the ways of looking to create a different image to produce, to fulfill this void left by the memory of my grandfather, and I trade additional machines to create this graphic novel based on the images I made with the GAN, with the ones that you saw, my field work, and now I'm using prompting. There was still one more step I could do, and I discovered a community of Red Army veterans still alive and able to tell their story, living in Brighton Beach, New York. 19 of them are turning 100 years or more this year, and I set to interview all of them, and here my position as a photographer, grandson of a veteran, visual researcher, and critic of technology of sorts, transferred into a griot of sorts, continuing this oral storytelling tradition, preserving the legacy, which is now being weaponized in justification of the horrific invasion of Ukraine. As a last step in this process, I've been showing them my images that I made with AI as another feedback loop test to see what they see. And some of them saw wars, scenes from concentration camps they liberated, but some of them said simply, it's nonsense. Another work I've been exploring to use AI is in the context of automation and looking at logistical systems, which I think are a perfect metaphor for the black box of the AI, that how automation conceals labor, especially the ones of the seafarer, where it becomes invisible. And I try to co-opt the technology used to veil the existence of these people to bring them back to light and illustrate their memories. So in this exercise of creating a correspondence with a sailor from Ukraine, Igor Osakov, I asked him to tell me his stories, which I remediate with synthetic imagery, reenactment photography, to see how AI can actually mediate memory, and how does images work in mediation of memory, and also discovering strange things, how memory works, where you can implant prosthetics by showing images that were not there in first place. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexey. All right, shall we begin?
We have 25 minutes to solve this problem.
Yes,
that's okay,
let's
right?
Go.
That's
Let's
no
go.
problem.
So what you've all shown and discussed with us brings up so many directions we could go in. One thought I think we could start off with, Hany, you touched on this in your intro. If we can't trust anything that we see, how does that shape what we think is real?
Yeah. So this is called the liar's dividend, that if something can be fake, nothing has to be real. And I don't think this is hyperbolic to say that if we don't have a shared factual system, I don't know how we have a society and a democracy. Let me give you a few examples.
Maybe first describe what the liar's dividend is.
Sorry,
too.
the liar's dividend is exactly this notion that when we enter this world where anything can be manipulated, you can deny reality. And if we don't have a shared reality, we don't have a democracy. Here's a few examples. 20% of Americans believe the core tenets of the QAnon conspiracy. 1 in 5. That's not the flat earthers, that's not the moon landing, which were in single digits, 1 in 5. 30% of Americans believe that climate change is a hoax. Not that it's not human driven, not how to respond to it, it's a hoax. And 1 in 2 Republicans believe that Donald Trump won the election 2 years ago. This is not small numbers. And this is before AI. This is just the good old-fashioned nonsense that has been the internet in disinformation campaigns and conspiracies. Now take that mess that we are in right now and throw jet fuel on it by the ability to create video of Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris saying whatever you want. And that is going to be a colossal mess if we don't get our act together. And the burden is on many people. It's on us as technologists, it is on journalists, it is on our regulators, and we are in the heart of Silicon Valley, and it is on the CEOs who are profiting to the tune of trillions of dollars on the backs of societies. And if you think things are bad here, Just go around the world to Myanmar and Sri Lanka and the Philippines and Brazil and India and see what is happening with disinformation campaigns that are fueling horrific human rights violations. We have got to get our act together.
So I'm going to pull on a thread there, and please jump in, Jonas and Alexey, because I know you have thoughts on this as well. When you say even before generative AI, we did not have a good sense of a shared reality.
We did not. And why is that? It was a different type of AI. It was, and you said it in the intro, it was the algorithmic amplification that is social media. We live in a world where social media is driven by engagement metrics. How many people and how long are you spending on this network? And therefore, the algorithms are learning, teaching themselves, what do I show you to keep you on this platform for as long as possible, to deliver ads, to get you to buy shit that you don't need? That's the economy of the internet. And so it is AI, but just a different version of AI. It's that algorithmic amplification that creates echo chambers and drives people into these bizarre filter bubbles, whether it's conspiracy or political or whatever else. So I think we are all victims of technology, but it's just different aspects of that technology.
This is kind of the difficult thing, isn't it? Because the more we, it's like the conundrum, because the more we identify that exactly this is the problem, you know, we agree this is the problem, we're in deep shit with this, and you know, we really, you know, anything can be forged, anything can be faked, but you know, it's the conclusion that, precisely that conclusion that, you know, it's impossible to know what's true. That is what dictators want us to think, you know, because that means that, you know, we need a strong leader to protect us.
I think that's right, and that's the danger here, is that we get so exhausted, you can't believe anything, and you retreat. You retreat from facts, you retreat from reading, you retreat from anything, and you go back to this very tribal position because you're exhausted. And I think that is exactly the danger, is that we can't absorb this anymore. It's overwhelming. And I think that's a big problem for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the place where the signal becomes indecipherable from noise. But then, that said, I think that there's a lot of it has to deal with even how we train the systems. You know, photography is not harmless either. And what went into the training of the systems is, you know, it's not artificial, it's geological, dealing with extractivism. You're dealing with exploitation of labor, and you know, now we're almost getting in the wake of all of this, experiencing this big problem. But it's almost like, is there a conversation to be not just with on the audiencing end and creating taxonomies and ways of verification, but more on the development of the future systems. Like, what are the future systems and how they can be engaged? Another thing to say is that the difference between a weapon and a tool is how you hold it. I think that it's undeniably destructive, but it also carries a fantastic fictional potential that photography perhaps can't. And it also allows a chance for photography to evolve and be something else. And maybe we can look at, provide some kind of a multivocality into the way we tell stories and look at history.
Let's hold on to that thought. Because this idea of what the role of photography changing is a really interesting one, specifically for this audience as well. In a world where any imagery can be generated instantaneously, what is the role of a photographer? What is the role of photography? I'm going to throw that to Jonas.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's of course not one, because, you know, photography, you know, has so many different ways to do it. Like in any language, but I think you know, this, to put it like that, I think it's not just the question of is it true or false, which is the big question around, you know, this barrage of AI generated images. It's also the sort of the sort of carpet bombing of sort of generic images, you know, like, and that's not a new thing. AI didn't invent that. Like, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like sort of in the last 15 years, I've sort of felt as a photographer that we're constantly, by the sheer number of images we're bombarded with every day, you know, so many of them sort of relatively good, sort of by all the classical definitions, generic, pleasant images. And why photograph? While we have such a mountain of photographs that is growing every day, you know, that problem has been there for years already. We produced that. Now the machine can amplify that, of course, and make it tenfold and hundredfold. Like, why make images? I always grapple with that question myself to stay a photographer, basically. And I think it comes down to basically, you know, it's not about the photographs. It's about the ideas. It's about the stories. It's about the communication. It's about transmitting of thoughts. I can guarantee you that the AI is not gonna reproduce, you know, Lynn and Isadora, who we just heard from, you know, like
For now.
Yeah, that's gonna take at least 3 years. No, but like
That was a joke.
no, but like that is the role of photographer, and whether they're doing photojournalism or they're doing whatever you want to call it, art photographer, whatever, it's that communication of ideas.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that, you know, Richard Powers said it, that story is an empathy machine, and I think that a story's potential, and story evolves, you know, that doesn't insist on existence of a singular truth, you know, it doesn't have that reliability in a way, and can transcend through generations, and also, you know, then manifest different levels of empathy and sympathy to the work we're doing. But we should also reconsider how we photograph. And back to that conversation of us, you know, and speaking of AI augmenting the previous issues, it's like if it's perpetuating biases is the way we're looking at the world through photography, that it's almost putting a mirror in the way of the previous systems of knowledge productions, and it's perpetuating and amplifying it.
So, pulling on that a little bit, let's talk about the process of creating photography these days. And so, you know, as a creator, you draw inspiration and you go out and you have an idea and you go and create. How has these projects maybe changed your workflow? And I would reframe it to Hany too. What are you seeing in how the process for making photography has changed?
You guys want to start? Yeah, I can say. Well, for me, it's photography. Like working with AI extensively, it's made me think of photography as a form of data collection, not in this ultimately cold way, but more that there's also a place and time to talk about history of photography and talk about the tools themselves. How can we look at how they operate and looking at these systems rather than what they produce? I'd say this is what the newest developments of my work has been, that's caused by this new industrial revolution of looking at this new language.
Because in some ways you're surprised by what comes out, or because...
Well, surprised by with synthetic images?
Yeah.
Well, and the way I work is like, it's also, I'm not interested to recreate photography with the AI systems I'm creating. I'm interested in creating new languages, because, you know, they're synthetic by definition. It's summaries of observation resulting in this synthetic image, not analytic. It's not true a priori. It doesn't have this agenda of a photograph, right? And they can work with, both have a place to exist and be in communication.
Hany, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, first of all, I'm an applied mathematician. I'm the last person who should be chiming in on what photography is or even being on this panel, but, you know, here I am. So I think what's fascinating to me about photography is that it is so many things to so many different people. And where I worry about things is, for example, in the International Criminal Court, where you are trying to document human rights violations, and there are serious issues trying to understand what's going on in Russia, in Myanmar, in other parts of the world, and trying to seek justice for those people who have been harmed. Or in the courts, documenting police violence against our citizens. How do we reason about those things, those high-stakes issues, when we live in this really interesting world? And don't get me wrong, there's lots of cool things and creative things that can come from generative AI, and I'm excited about them. I just don't want them to bleed into these very high-stakes issues, and I can tell you they are. Because you go into courts of law now, and people are saying, how do I know this image? How do I know this video? How do I know this audio? I get hate mail today of people telling me George Floyd was not killed by police officers, all of those videos are fake. How do we have a conversation about police violence? How do we have a conversation about social issues if people want to just deny reality? So I'm all for the technology, but when it crosses over into this documenting of serious issues that impact people's lives, I start to get a little nervous.
It's all about context, isn't it? I mean, and that's why it's impossible to talk about it as, you know, is photography good or bad? Is AI good or bad? You know, in some cases it can be illuminating, the AI. It can be creatively super interesting. Brilliant minds will guaranteed make some amazing projects with AI going forward. There's no doubt about it. But like you say, you don't want it to seep into that context. And I mean, just somebody showed me here today, and I was kind of, you know, showed me from the Instagram of Amnesty International just in the last days, you know, and you scroll through the feed and you know, you have one image of, you know, the aftermath of a bombing in Ukraine, and you know how many people died, and you know what atrocities happened, and the next image is AI generated photo series of an arrest of protesters in Colombia. That's pretty confusing.
Yeah. Here's another example of that, that's fascinating. The early days of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Ukrainians released a video of bombing of Paris and the Eiffel Tower. And it was, of course, fabricated. And at the very end, they fessed up. They said, imagine what was happening here was happening in another country in Europe. How would you respond? It was very powerful, and nobody's going to deny the Ukrainians the right to defend their country. But I thought, on balance, that video was a mistake. Because now Putin, every time a video is shown of human rights violation, can say, well, look, if they can fabricate this, why wouldn't they fabricate that? The mixing and matching of reality for Amnesty, for the Ukrainians, for the International Criminal Court is a dangerous game to be playing.
Well, then how do you change that game?
Okay. Unplug the internet. No, that's not it. Yeah, thank you. One person. So there is an effort, let me just mention it very briefly that I'm a part of. It's called the C2PA, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authentication, and its sister organization called the CAI, the Content Authentication Initiative. And what we are working on is developing, it's an open source, Linux Foundation, multi-stakeholder effort that says every time you pick up that camera, whether it's a mobile device or one of the fancy cameras you see around here, it will, we have 2 minutes left, by the way. It will determine where you are, when you are there, who you are, and what you recorded, cryptographically sign all that information and put it onto a type of blockchain, but it's not a blockchain, so don't yell at me. And what's really cool about that is it creates authentication at the point of recording, which is exactly where you want it, because that device is exactly the place where you want to authenticate. And I don't think that solves all of our problems, but I think it solves part of them. And then on the other side, I would say those in the synthetic media side, the OpenAIs, the Midjourneys, the Stable Diffusions, the 11 Labs, need to take responsibility for the content they are creating. They should be watermarking and fingerprinting every single piece of content that they are creating so that when it goes out into the world, we have a chance of understanding its context and what it was.
We are rushing towards the end of this panel, and as Jonas said at the beginning to me, he was like, we are doomed to feel like this conversation is cut off too short, which I feel like we're now feeling. In the past few minutes, we've talked about the process of photography, how it's changed, opportunities and threats posed by these new technologies, potential solutions in the space of authenticity when it comes to images. We're going to close out with one quick-fire last question to our panelists. They don't know what this is, so they're going to have to come up with it in the last minute. Here we go. In one sentence, what do you think the next revolution in photography will be, and what are you going to do about it?
We should start at that end.
It's hard to be optimistic here, but I'll try. next revolution is going to be, I mean, I think it's echoing what was said before about the painting. You know, it's in a way that AI is here to revolutionize photography, because look at the painting, like what happened when photography was created. Photography liberated art from its aura, and then you had expressionism, impressionism, avant-garde, abstract art, you name it. So I think that the next revolution is exactly to be witnessed of what, maybe it is actually this chance to emancipate photography from its authority over truth, and that will bring new possibilities.
That was one
On
hell
the
of a long
spot?
sentence.
Wow.
But I'll take the glass half full version. People get so sick of the garbage, junk images, social media, etc. They start reading books again and paying attention to photographers out there making great, interesting, thoughtful work. That was a crowd pleaser, wasn't it?
Hany.
I like that idea of a backlash. I'm going to add one more thing to it, which is half a glass half empty, which is I think we have been moving over the last 20, 30 years from desktop computers to laptops to mobile devices, and I think what is coming is eventually augmented reality. So glasses you will wear that will fully superimpose virtual and real worlds that I think is actually going to make things worse, not better.
Well, on that note, I actually, in case that Hany did end us on a note like that, I did come with a quote. It's more of something to take a thought to leave you with to think about. Zoe Williams, who writes for The Guardian, in a piece last week said, "The question isn't who made this art, a human or a machine, or even can machine-made art be real? It's more fundamental than that. How much truth is there in my reality?" And we'll leave you with that. I think the bar is open. Join us for a drink. Thank you.
Thank you. Catch light.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.